Hi, I'm Bob Springer. I'm going to talk to you today about sleep and wellness. I spent the last 45 years in a practice of medicine in Waco involving pulmonary, critical care, hospice, but my ultimate passion was sleep. And since I've left practice 5 years ago, my passion now is making sure that you understand how to sleep well. We're going to talk today, these are my credentials when I was a professional guy, but now I'm just Bob, the fellow Y guy. So what is health? Should be a basic idea. Somebody said healthcare was very difficult. Well, it is, but health is not so difficult. Most of you guys at the Y understand that. The World Health Organization defines it as a state of physical, mental, and social well-being, not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And of course, I spent 45 years looking at diseases or infirmities. Now I get to look at it from a different standpoint. Wellness is really defined as a conscious, self-directed, evolving process of achieving health. It's proactive, not reactive, not I need to lose or want to exercise, lose weight, but by daily monitoring of your weight, exercise, and sleep, achieving your goals of health. And most of you, because you're involved with the Y, do this. Now, the components of a healthy lifestyle have traditionally been thought to be diet-based and exercise-based. I'm really trying to promote the idea that sleep has to be an integral part of this. As a matter of fact, it's not just that you can sleep or exercise or change your diet. All of them interact. The time you exercise makes a difference. The time you sleep, even your biome is related to all of this. So I have a mandate of trying to teach people about early sleep wellness education, and it really is going to be involving the next generation. By the time you get to be my age, it's something that's already set in place. So this is the yin-yang sign. It is the trademark of the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, and it's there to kind of tell you that there is a blend of light and dark, male, female. The opposites aren't diametrically opposed, they actually blend with each other. And we're all born with a set of genes that may map where we're going to go, but we can change those genes through sleep, exercise, and even diet. So a brief talk about circadian rhythm. Those are 24-hour cycles. We live in a 24-hour world. So we're exposed to light and dark in the yin-yang idea for 12 hours. We have a clock that is located directly between your eyes, 1,000 cells, very small little nucleus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's under genetic control, so we may be a day person or a night person, but it can be changed primarily by light. Light seems to affect the retinal receptors in the back of the eyes. They go by direct nerve endings to the suprachiasmatic nucleus. They lead to the pineal gland, which has all the hormonal balances, and one of the most important hormones for sleep, of course, is melatonin. So light suppresses melatonin, and melatonin rises as light disappears. So, what is the default mode of sleep? This is something that I, as a sleep doctor, didn't even realize until maybe 10 years ago. Back before the electric light was available, back before 1850, people generally slept in this bimodal sleep pattern. They would go to bed at dusk or shortly after dusk. They would have a first sleep that would last for about 4 hours. Then they would have a 2-hour window where they woke up, and I'll tell you in a moment what they did during those 2 hours. Then they had a second sleep that was another 4 hours, because the need for sleep is about 8 hours in human beings at least. So this bimodal sleep pattern existed. How do we know? Well, interestingly, there was a paper given in 2010 at the American Academy of Sleep Medicine by this gentleman, Dr. Roger Ekrich, who happened to not be a sleep researcher. He was in the history department at Virginia Tech University. He wrote a book, At Day's Close, Night Times in the Past. It was in 2005. He had 500 references in that book to this bimodal sleep pattern back in the Middle Ages. And we were wondering if that was something that still existed in our makeup. And it turns out that a study in 1990 where they took normal college students, if that's what you can call them, into a sleep lab, they gave them 14 hours of darkness and 10 hours of awake. They took away their cell phones, they took away their computers, and how these kids did it, I'm sure that they gave them quite a bit of money to complete this. They found that the natural sleep pattern was reproduced. They slept for 4 hours, they had 2 hours of awakening, and then went back to sleep again for another 4 hours. So what happens in the middle of the night? That's probably the most common question. 2 hours of, gee, what are we going to do? Well, it turns out that maybe we did literature, we wrote in the middle of the night to candlelight. And remember, candlelight is only about 10 lux. It's not enough to suppress your melatonin. Art was produced in the middle of the night. We had people deciding under the cloak of darkness to go and rob other people's houses and do mischief. And it turns out that the population explosion in the in the 1700s, 1600s may have been because that was the time to procreate. So how did we evolve from the bimodal sleep pattern we're talking about to unimodal sleep, which is what most of us do? We go to bed, try to sleep 7 or 8 hours, and then we get up. Well, it's the invention of the commercially available light bulb. And Thomas Edison, of course, is involved with that. There's a light bulb. But Edison, interestingly, had a philosophy that he just felt that sleep was a total waste of time. He says, I owe my success to the fact that I never had a clock in my workroom. 75 of us worked 20 hours a day, slept only 4 hours, and thrived on it. Now, this is not exactly the rest of the story, as has been said before. If you looked at his lab, he didn't have a clock, but he did have a little cot down here in the lower left-hand corner. He also had a bed in his library. Interestingly, he took naps all of the time, even when he was involved with an important meeting. So he probably got 6 to 7 hours over a 24-hour period. He just split it up and was bragging that he could exist on 4 hours. So his solution to the problem of sleep was to create electric lights, and that created a whole new paradigm for the industrial age. Now, there's a Dear God letter. I don't know if you can see this, but it was written by Donna, I think in the first or second grade. We read that Thomas Edison made light, but in Sunday school they said you did it, so I bet he stole your idea. Donna. So what happens when we have artificial light to the human? We delay sleep onset into darkness. We force the first and second sleeps together. We allow for 24-hour activity for the first time. We can do shift work. there are inherent problems with human beings going through shift work. And I can tell you as a physician, we are prone to this shift work problem. So I'm just going to contrast Thomas Edison, who I call the short sleeping tinker, and I'm going to go to the long sleeping thinker. This is the polar opposite. This is every sleep doctor's hero. Albert Einstein used long sleep to solve thought problems. Now this is very interesting. It turns out that things like E equals MC squared were really created out of dreams that Einstein had in the middle of the night. He would spend all day long with these massive equations, not understanding how he could consolidate everything until it came to him in a dream. And he knew that. He kept a notepad at his bedside, and supposedly E equals MC squared showed up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Is that the same as daytime math for Albert? Who knows? He may not have been quite as good at daytime. So this is something I taught every single one of my 15,000 patients that I had in sleep. What is normal sleep architecture? You need to know what this is in order to go through a sleep study and figure out what's going on. Turns out that you go through 90-minute sleep cycles with deep sleep, then REM sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep. And if you notice through the night, deep sleep diminishes as time goes on, REM sleep increases. And if you split this in two, most of your first half or first 4 hours of sleep is spent in deep sleep, which is the restorative, restful sleep. Second half of the night is spent in REM sleep. And REM sleep is extremely interesting. I could spend an entire talk on it. You're basically poikilothermic, which basically means your body temperature becomes the temperature of the room, but your mind activity, memory processes really increase during this period of time. It's important to get all those stages of sleep for a good next day. Now, we still don't know the full purpose of sleep, but we know that if you don't get sleep, there are some major consequences. And of course, that's what I involved myself for the last 40 years in seeing patients with this. Now, the most common reason not to get a good night's sleep is you're not in bed long enough. Less than 7 hours of sleep was the norm probably until 30 years ago, 35 years ago. Through educational understandings, more and more people are getting closer to really the required 8 hours of sleep a night. And you need to remember that teens, the guys who go to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and get up at 5 or 6, to go to their football practice, need 9 to 10 hours of sleep a night to function well the next day. Major problem. We'll go through that in just a second. Now, I involve myself with quality of sleep problems. How did people's sleep get fragmented? And of course, we're talking about restless leg syndrome, sleep apnea, things like that. And I'll skip over that. Now, the other thing that I saw a lot of was shift workers in my office. And we could work with those guys using melatonin and artificial bright lights. So circadian disturbances, sleeping at the wrong time, getting jet lag if you're going to Europe, all of those things can lead to sleep deprivation. Now, this is a short list of the consequences of sleep deprivation, and I'm talking about less than 8 hours a night. It increases your morbidity, which is diseases in general, your general mortality. You may live up to 10 years shorter than other people, especially if you do things like shift work or you chronically sleep 5 or 6 hours a night. Motor vehicle accidents because of the consequences of being sleepy, medical complications, diabetes, blood pressure problems, acid reflux, heart disease, your body mass index will increase, and I'll go through that in just a little bit. Your mood, your memory, your motivation all have something to do with a good night's sleep. And then finally, almost the most important thing, your pain, immune, and insulin thresholds all change once you don't get a good night's sleep. So you're going to be more prone to insulin resistance and diabetes. Your immune system isn't going to work as well. They've given flu shots to people, sleep deprived them. They found out it doesn't work. So you got to get a good night's sleep even with that. Pain threshold changes markedly with a good night's sleep. So the biggest consequence of not getting a good night's sleep might be motor vehicle accidents, driving at 60 miles an hour, closing your eyes for an average of 3 seconds, and we've all done this. If you don't have a driver's license, you've met me, or if you're not being honest with you, you go 300 feet, the length of a football field, in an unguided missile. Frightening from my standpoint to visit with people. I even had a motorcyclist who fell asleep regularly on his motorcycle, and his buddies would keep him going. So what's the number one cause of sleep deprivation in this country? Sleeping next to a person who has a sleep disorder. The people who have sleep disorders don't know they have it, but I can guarantee spouses or partners of people do know it, and they're the ones who actually report the problem. So my big issue is, okay, you got a sleep problem like sleep apnea. CPAPs are a crude way of keeping your airway open. I think there are better and better ways coming along. It may be reason number 24 I dropped out of sleep medicine. This is a very frustrating, very important treatment, but very difficult for a lot of people to tolerate. Now, this may be one of the most important slides of the whole thing. It's very complicated, but in 2014, a prize was given to a group of scientists who sleep-deprived rats. You have in your brain cerebral spinal fluid. You don't have lymph fluid like you do in the rest of your body. Lymph fluid drains waste products from proteins. The cerebral spinal fluid is the only thing that can really drain the brain of proteins that are building up during the day. Amyloid accumulation may be, and probably is, accumulated when you get chronic sleep depression. And what does that lead to? Dementia and Alzheimer's. So can't say that it's a direct link, but it is certainly there. So get a good night's sleep, and you may appreciate it later in life. So the new sleep education paradigm for the 21st century for now. When I went to medical school 50 years ago, we didn't have that much understanding about sleep. Now, if you are at home, you ask the questions and you don't have time to go see a doctor, who tells? So let's find that out. Basically, you're checking out your phone, it's 2 a.m., you're not sleeping, you open up an app, you expose yourself to blue light at 2 o'clock in the morning to ask Google or Siri. There are now people that are understanding this and trying to use telemedicine as a quick fix for some of these problems. What about Fitbits and wellness technology that's available? They're activity monitors only. There's been a lot of controversy in sleep about whether or not they tell you if you're asleep. Supposedly, like in this one type of tracing, it will tell you whether or not you're sleeping. The question is, the only way I can tell if somebody's sleeping is not through an activity monitor. I have to do brainwave tests, and we don't have a portable monitor to do that. So your activity monitor, this is a small slide, may misinterpret what you're doing. This guy says, my Fitbit says I'm sleeping, as he's drinking a cup of coffee there. There are some limits on that. Now, this is the Boston Bruins, 2011. It's a professional sports team. What does this have to do with sleep? This is Dr. Chuck Zeisler. head of the Harvard Medical Research Lab, he was offered for the lab a $100,000 prize if he could tell the Boston Celtics and the Boston Bruins how to improve their athletic activity. He spent several years going through sleep diaries, trying to understand their exposure to light-dark cycles when they would fly from the East Coast to the West Coast. He went through all this data, and he got up to give a news conference, and he announced only 3 words at the news conference. The answer is get more sleep. He thought, after all of this, all you got to do is get 1 hour less of training, 1 hour more of sleep. Now, that sounds easier said than done, but that was his conclusion. The Boston Bruins used that in 2011, a year later. They didn't change anything else, but they got more sleep. They won the championship. Now, in the New York Times, there was this ad for just skip the gym, get more sleep, and they're advertising sleep clothes instead of gym clothes. So, I mean, that's an extreme. But 8 hours of good sleep makes a huge difference. What about teens and preteens and their exposure to digital light and sleep deprivation? A lot of kids, especially in the northern part of this country, start their school 7:30 in the morning. Their early morning start times does not coincide with their clock, which basically says wake up at 9. They may be going to bed at 2 and they may be trying to get through school. So it has a huge effect, and some schools are starting to delay morning start times until about 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm coming pretty close to the end here. Morbid obesity and sleep loss. Huge connection here. If you get less sleep because of leptin and ghrelin hormonal activity, your appetite increases. If you wake up in the morning craving a donut and a cup of coffee with a bunch of sugar, more likely than not, you haven't had a good night's sleep. And as your BMI increases, your body mass index increases, you get more sleep fragmentation. So it's a chicken and the egg thing. So this war on childhood obesity that Michelle Obama was asking us to think about really ought to include more sleep again. So sleep benefits memory, athletic and mental performance, immunity, hormonal balance, your quality of life. My favorite questions came from my patients. This is a kid who was in our sleep lab who said, "Can you record my dream and give it to me on a DVD?" My answer to him was, maybe when you grow older, you can use your curiosity like that to actually do something like that. And believe it or not, in the last year, we are starting to be able to record dreams of rats in a certain form. So don't ever put that out. Now, there's 2 good books that I refer you to. Sleep Disorders for Dummies. I've got my own signed copy by Max Hirschkowitz on that. The other book that is becoming so important for me, it's a Bible to me, is The Creative Destruction of Medicine by ERIC Topol at the Scripps Institute. Basically looking at the new form of medicine, knowing what your genome is, adapting to the digital age, and maybe physicians are going to be totally different in the next 25 or 30 years. Final slide. Sleep well for a better tomorrow. You may need more of the dark side. So, I'd be happy to talk with anyone in the future about sleep problems here at the Y, or if there's any topics that you want me to expand on, I'd be happy to talk about that in the future. Thank you very much for your time.